Well, we've been talking about it for a couple of years now, but it looks like today was finally the day that the regulators decided to declare war on DeFi. This was probably inevitable. What use are KYC and AML if you could just hop on over to crypto where they don't exist at all? The big question is what happens next? Ready? Let's go. Today, we are going to discuss the Treasury Department's DeFi risk assessment and what it's obviously signaling, the first Oracle integration on Cardano, and a status update from Meld. If you feel like these shadowy DeFi supercoders might not actually be hiding from the authorities, they might just be cold, or if you're finding value in these videos each weekday, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. So, of course, I'm just joking when I call them shadowy DeFi supercoders, but this document from the US Department of the Treasury titled Illicit Finance Risk Assessment of Decentralized Finance. I love the redundant use of the word finance. This document really does seem to want everyone to believe that DeFi is full of nothing but North Korean hackers who are also terrorist financiers who on the weekend do nothing but engage in ransomware attacks. That seems to be the whole goal of this document. And it's not a short document. This is like a 42-page document, and you can tell what this document is all about. The powers that be knew they had great ways to put the hurt on all the centralized exchanges. They knew that those exchanges rely on their fiat on ramps and off ramps. That's the whole reason that everybody in crypto uses them. And that's a great way to put the squeeze on those exchanges. But they don't have the same kind of control over DeFi because DeFi does not have those same fiat on and off ramps. They don't have those banking relationships that are required for fiat and fiat on ramps and off ramps. So it's a lot harder for the regulators to kind of put their thumb on DeFi. But they do have these great tools that are related to anti-money laundering, know your customer requirements, and the countering of terrorist financing tools. So these are pretty powerful because pretty much no politician in the government is going to stand up and say, hey, maybe we should be a little more lax on these terrorist financiers. Maybe we should allow a little more money laundering. It's pretty hard to put forward this agenda that you think we're being too hard on the terrorists or too hard on the money launderers. So these are pretty powerful tools for regulators who really just have an overall agenda of trying to suppress crypto as hard as possible. I've talked in the past about why I think they're actually doing that. I don't think it's like an evil agenda to, enrich themselves by, doing the dirty work of the banks. I don't think it's that. I think that it's just a misguided patriotism. It's almost like I've described it before this way. It's almost like there was a briefing, probably not this administration, probably not the last one, but maybe the administration before where all these current people came from. It's like there was some kind of a briefing or maybe a series of briefings that were about crypto. And the gist of the briefings was, hey, crypto is basically going to disintermediate the banks, including the central banks and all the fiat currencies. Look at it. It's right there in all their white papers. All they want to do is displace the fiat currencies. And for the US, the dollar is a great tool to do a lot of different things, including export inflation. The US currently has this great position. It can inflate away all of its debts. It can devalue those debts through inflation, by debasing the currency. And because there are so many dollar holders outside of the US, they can export the pain of a lot of that inflation. It's a great deal for the US. The US dollar is a great tool. And so I can imagine these politicians, if you came to them a couple of administrations ago and you said, hey, this is what crypto aims to do and is very possibly going to do, you could see them set in motion kind of a 10-year plan to suppress crypto, a plan over some time period to do everything they could to slow the viral growth of crypto. And I think what we're seeing sort of in 2022 and also this year in 2023 and for the foreseeable future, pending the next election, is the execution of those long-term plans. So let's get into it. What are these regulators up to? I'm just going to use the term regulators sort of generically because it's a whole bunch of different agencies working together, agencies and departments working together in this president's working group. And all of the characters we've talked about in this channel are basically in this meeting. You've got Gensler and Powell and Yellen, and they're all working together to suppress crypto the best they can. So at least the people who are controlling that meeting are, and everybody else pretty much has to go along with it, it seems, just based on what's coming out of, all of the different governmental organizations that are represented in that meeting. So page 2 of this document kind of lays out the gist of what they're trying to do with DeFi. And it is what you'd expect, but they're a little bit more straightforward about it. And they kind of tell you exactly how they're going to go about this. They say, many existing DeFi services covered by the Bank Secrecy Act failed to comply with AML, anti-money laundering, and CFT, countering the financing of terrorism obligations, a vulnerability that illicit actors exploit. A lack of a common understanding among industry participants of how AML, CFT obligations may apply to DeFi services exacerbates this risk. In some cases, and this is the important sentence, industry providers may purposefully seek to decentralize a virtual asset service in an attempt to avoid triggering AML CFT obligations. I think all of us in crypto who are paying attention probably realize that that's why every single DeFi platform is so eager to distribute their tokens out to the general public. The reason they don't just exclude the general public completely is that they think decentralization is a shield, that it will protect them and they don't have to do the AML, KYC, CFT stuff. The Treasury Department is telling you right here that is not the case. They say many of these industry providers purposely seek to decentralize a virtual asset without recognizing that the obligations still apply so long as the provider continues to offer covered services. So they're telling you, even if you are, air quotes, decentralized, which often just means you sold tokens to everybody, even if you sold governance tokens to everybody, Treasury doesn't care. They don't give a damn. They don't care at all that you sold tokens to the public. What they care about is, are you offering services to people that are covered by the Bank Secrecy Act? If so, and you're not doing AML, KYC stuff, they're going to have a problem with you. They say at the same time, some DeFi services developed with opaque organization structure may present critical challenges to supervision. And for cases in which DeFi services are not complying with their AML CFT obligations, enforcement of applicable statutory and regulatory obligations. So they say, hey, we think you have to comply with all the Bank Secrecy Stuff Act, regardless of decentralization. And they also point out some of you in DeFi seem to have opaque organizations. There's no transparency to your organization. And we know they're implying, we know you're doing that because we're going to go after you eventually. They say, this assessment recommends strengthening U.S. AML CFT supervision and, when relevant, enforcement of virtual asset activities, including DeFi services. So let's pause right there. They're saying right now, they're recommending enforcement actions. So notice that we're going to strengthen supervision and, when relevant, enforcement. They're going to go after DeFi. They're going to go after DeFi. They put this paper out there because they already know exactly who they're going to go after. This paper is coming out to kind of like lay out the roadmap so that everybody knows it's coming, so they can rely on it when they do go after DeFi services. But they already know who they're going to go after. They say this is to increase compliance by virtual asset firms with BSA, Bank Secrecy Act, obligations. I know some of you in DeFi are probably thinking that you somehow fall outside the Bank Secrecy Act. Don't worry, they've got a solution for that too. They say the assessment also finds that to the extent a DeFi service falls outside the current definitions of a financial institution under the Bank Secrecy Act, the assessment recommends enhancing the US AML CFT regulatory regime by closing any identified gaps in the Bank Secrecy Act to the extent that they allow certain DeFi services to fall outside of the BSA's definition of financial institution. So they recognize there might be some loopholes here, and some DeFi platforms, services, protocols might fall outside that definition in the Bank Secrecy Act. They're just going to go ahead and extend those regulations. So don't worry. They're going to broaden their net. They're going to make the net wider, but keep the holes small so they can get all of the fish in the sea, and that probably includes your DeFi platform. Here's a great section toward the end of their document where they're going to suggest something that sounds all right, and then they're going to suggest some things that sound a little bit scarier. So they say many potential solutions are designed to support various elements of compliance with AML CFT obligations while maximizing user privacy. You're like, you guys actually want to maximize user privacy? That sounds good. Okay, maybe we're not used to the the AML KYC part, but privacy sounds good, including through digital identity technology to support identity verification that can be informed by users' transaction history on the public blockchain. Zero knowledge proofs can also enable a DeFi user to confirm that their identity has been verified without revealing personal information. You're like, okay, that sounds like the kind of stuff we talk about in Cardano all the time, using digital identity and ZK proofs to prove that you can KYC without actually having to give up the details of your identity. That all sounds great. Then you get to this next part. Industry solutions may also enable illicit finance risk mitigation to be integrated into smart contract code. So be clear, they're talking about hard coding the following things into the smart contracts. And that can be trouble because on certain blockchains that have a lot of DeFi going on, those smart contracts just sort of get deployed once. So once they've smart coded these mitigation tools into the smart contract, they're pretty much there. And then they're going to tell you what they are. Restricting transaction frequency, placing threshold limits for certain customer types, or using oracles to screen against virtual asset wallet addresses appearing on sanctions lists and to prevent sanctioned addresses from using a DeFi service. So we've got three things there. They want to be able to restrict how often you can use the DeFi service. They want to restrict the amounts you can use on the DeFi service, and they want oracles to consult blacklists. So this all sounds okay, of course, if you're like, oh, this is all for illicit finance. But ask yourself, I mean, you can argue that if money launderers and illicit finance, people engaging in illicit finance can't, transact as frequently or with as much money, that's going to help mitigate illicit finance, sure. But it also sounds like more than that, because I think really just identifying individuals is the way you identifying who someone is or where they're from. If they're in a sanctioned country, I mean, I think that's really the way you combat illicit finance. All this stuff about restricting transaction frequency, placing threshold limits for certain customer types, that all sounds more like stuff you want to do to non-accredited investors. I think regardless of them sort of painting this as part of the picture of illicit finance, fighting illicit finance, I kind of have a feeling that language ends up being placed on non-accredited investors, which is a huge problem for DeFi. And then you've got this sort of this idea of an oracle consulting a blacklist. Again, sounds okay if you think they're just going to do this to terrorists and money launderers, but I think crypto has reason to be worried about what happens down the road with these blacklists. Is it always just money launderers and terrorists, or do other people end up getting put on these blacklists? So there you have it. There is the current administration's roadmap for how they are going to neuter DeFi. In the world of Cardano proper today, we found out that Meld has hit some kind of an issue. They say, as a part of our thorough security analysis of the lending and borrowing protocol, Meld has identified an issue with the way transaction processing is handled on Cardano and how it impacts the Meld protocol that could disrupt key parts of Meld's protocol. We are currently collaborating with IOG on testing with the next iteration of the node software to better understand how we might jointly address this. We'll be able to offer the Meld community further feedback on progress on this during April. And for its part, IOG said, we are currently working closely with the Meld team on a solution to the issue currently impacting Cardano transaction processing on the pre-production testnet. We appreciate that Meld has brought this issue to our attention. And of course, people wanted more details because it wasn't exactly clear what kind of an issue Meld was talking about. Someone posted this saying it was from the Liquid Discord. And it looks like this is a post from DC of Liquid saying, okay, I spoke to Ken. That's Ken of Meld. The issue he's discussing is if the chain is under load, it would be difficult to get Oracle update and liquidation transactions through. To be clear, this is not at all specific to pooled lending protocols and would affect every collateralized deposition, stablecoin, or P2P lending protocol. So it sounds like if this is what they're talking about, then this is the same issue that people have been talking about for a long time, that if the chain is under heavy load, it might be hard to avoid getting liquidated or something if you can't get your transactions through in time. Also, getting Oracle updates might be difficult. So, of course, I mean, this is why we need scaling. Just in general, in distributed systems like this, you need some kind of some kind of scaling. If you're gonna have these very time dependent transactions going on like this, then you need some kind of scaling mechanism to handle these periods of heavy load. Of course, the proponents of fee markets would rather we just have a fee market and then you could prioritize transactions like this by paying a higher fee. Me personally, if I wanted fee markets, I would go to Ethereum. Having said that, I also think there's a difference between an unlimited fee market where there is no roof and a tiered fee system where the tiers are capped. Finally, I'll leave you with this. It looks like people are celebrating the first Oracle integration on Cardano. This poster says the day is finally here. This is a major occasion for the Cardano ecosystem as a whole, showing that projects are following the continuous push for full decentralization on Cardano to the moon. He says Charlie 3's oracles have been integrated by Liquid, a major DeFi product on Cardano. I know this is a long time coming. I know a lot of people have been waiting for quite a while to see a sort of Cardano native Oracle get integrated on Cardano. It looks like that day is here. I hope you had a great week, and I hope you're getting ready for a fun spring weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.